In the Chinese metaphysical system, there are 3 places that can restrain ghosts: schools, government agencies like police station, and the military. However, despite this, many netizens still share their encounters with supernatural events during their military service. And in this episode, we will start with the rescue mission conducted by the military. Okay, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every Saturday night, real Asian horrors will wait for you here. And if you're curious about any Chinese supernatural themes, please let me know. I'd like to share with you that. First off, I was a die-hard atheist, never believed in ghosts or any of that mumbo-jumbo. But in the year of 2001, something so eerie happened to me that it still gives me chills. Back then, I was serving in the army, handling communication support for our battalion. One day in July, the elite squad went out of the camp for training. They decided to do some water training in the Funan River near Chengdu South Railway Station. And tragically, during this exercise, the squad leader and the 2-year soldier drowned and their bodies remain unfound. To expedite the search, the battalion formed a 10-people salvage team to retrieve the bodies. Because communication was crucial, I, along with the communication soldier, joined the salvage team too. We conducted repeated searches downstream from the accident site, but due to the complex riverbed caused by years of sand mining, we couldn't locate the bodies. So we set up an observation point near a bridge, hoping to spot them when they surfaced. And to prevent the bodies from drifting away, we set up barricades in the river, stationed motorboats on the shore. We divided into 3 teams, taking turns to observe the river surface around the clock. For 2 consecutive days, there was not a sign of it. Then, at 10 p.m. on the 3rd day, it started raining heavily. Suddenly, one soldier approached us, saying he had a strange dream. In his dream, the drunk squad leader appeared to him, crying and lamenting his pitiful fate. He explained that he had tried to rescue the 2-year soldier out of kindness, but out of survival instinct, the soldier grabbed him tightly, causing both of them to perish. He said he would come tonight and pleaded for our help to retrieve him. Regardless of whether it was real or not, we immediately made full preparations. At midnight, the rain suddenly picked up and the river began to rise. Around 1 a.m., the lookout on the bridge reported seeing something resembling a blood floating downstream. We sprang into action, drove a motorboat to the center of the river, confirming it was indeed the squad leader. One soldier maneuvered the motorboat closer while another prepared a rope loop to snag the body and pull it to the shore. Strangely, despite multiple attempts, they couldn't snag it. In no time, the body drifted nearly 100 meters downstream. As the river narrowed and the current intensified, we grew increasingly anxious. At this moment, one soldier yelled anxiously, "Brother, wait for us. We're here to take you home." Miraculously, after his words, the drifting body suddenly stopped and spawned in place. The staff sergeant and his team quickly threw out the rope, and finally, we retrieved the first body. Just as we were placing the body on the bank, another lookout ran over, claiming to have seen something resembling another body drifting downstream. However, the other 2 lookouts didn't confirm seeing anything. Just in case, the staff sergeant immediately organized a team and headed 20 kilometers downstream to the creek pier in Hualongxi to intercept, and I was one of them. As we drove towards Hualongxi, the rain grew heavier and the lightning streaked across the sky, yet there was no thunder. The only sound were the rustling of trees by the roadside and the rushing water of the river. The soldier driving was from our special police squadron, a top-notch driver. Due to the bad weather, I reminded him to drive safely, then closed my eyes to rest for a bit. But before I could, a sudden blare of horns startled me awake. Somewhere along the way, our car had been blocked by a slow-moving vehicle in the middle of the road. It was pitch black, without a single light, almost like a van truck, and no matter how much we honked, it wouldn't budge. The eeriest part was, with strong headlights, we could see in the hopper there was a person sitting toward us, wrapped in a raincoat, completely obscured. He tossed something out and it landed on our windshield, a pile of Jaws paper. It seemed like we encountered a funeral procession in the dead of night. What a rotten luck. I urged the driver to overtake quickly. With his exceptional skills, honking like mad, we finally managed to pass that car, leaving it far behind. But just as we passed it, I glanced back with lingering fear and saw that person simultaneously turning to look at us. A flash of lightning revealed his pale, ghostly face. We were all shocked with horror. We continued driving, but at that time, everyone was wide awake, silently watching out the windows. After a few kilometers, just as we rounded a bend, that car inexplicably appeared again in front of us. Still black painting, still without lights, still blocking the road, still with that dark figure scattering Jaws paper into the air. At that moment, I thought something was definitely wrong. I immediately instructed the driver to turn into a nearby side road, deciding to take a detour. The driver quickly turned still, and we finally escaped from that phantom funeral car. After a while, just as we had all breathed a sigh of relief, Our car jerked twice, then stopped. We hurriedly got out to check and were horrified to find that our car had veered off the road and nearly slid into the nearby river. Half of the right front wheel was hanging over the riverbank. That was so strange. We were supposed to be on the asphalt road. How could that happen? In a state of nervousness, the driver quickly reversed the car back onto the right side of the road. We decided to stop for a while. There wasn't a single car on the road besides ours, no lights, no people. The road was lined with rows of straight poplar trees, their trunks painted white at the base, reflecting a ghostly glow under the headlights. In the distance, the winding bridges looked like tombstones. The rain continued to pour, and the wind rustled the trees and reeds along the riverbank, making a mournful sound. Seeing all this, we felt a chilling sensation in our hearts, as if we were walking the path to the underworld, with the drowned soldiers constantly calling out to us. Soon after, we continued the journey. When we arrived at the town, it was early morning, and the entire village was shrouded in darkness. We parked the car and all lay down, intending to get some rest. But I couldn't sleep no matter how hard I tried. After tossing and turning for an hour, I got out of the car and went out into the rain to investigate. To my shock, I found that our car had inexplicably moved back to where our car stopped, and the most horrible thing was, we were just stopped in the center of the road. In this situation, any car coming from either direction could easily collide with ours, potentially causing a fatal accident or even sending us into the river to drown. I quickly woke everyone up and we all got out of the car, thoroughly astonished. Then we hurriedly drove the car into the town again, circling through the narrow street until we finally saw a glimmer of light ahead. A small breakfast shop had opened its doors and a middle-aged couple was preparing to cook. We drove straight to the shop and parked in front of it. As the sky began to brighten, the rain stopped, and the sunlight spread through every inch of the town. Seemed like the nightmare we had experienced last night was just a dream. Just when we were heading toward the pier, the commander called to inform us that the second body had been found and retrieved. Back at the base, we heard about another strange incident that occurred last night, just when we were on the road. As the bodies were retrieved and loaded onto the hearse, the captain softly called out the names of the two soldiers. Miraculously, both bodies simultaneously shed crimson tears. Whether it was coincidence or not, that night, our group of fearless soldiers who had been educated as atheists truly experienced fear and a touch of belief. In Chinese belief, the souls of those who drowned are said to be forever trapped underwater until they found a substitute to free them. So based on my experience and knowledge, the black man scattering Jaws paper was likely their comrade who had not yet been recovered. His appearance may have been to draw the squad's attention, leading the team unknowingly into the river to drown, thus becoming his substitute. Later, when they mysteriously found themselves moved to the middle of the road, it was likely he was attempting to push them into the water just like he expected. My mom went to visit my brothers in Xingtai, Hebei province. I happened to be around at the time, so I decided to accompany my mother by taking a taxi. The eerie tale began as soon as we got into the car. Upon getting in, my mother said to the driver, "Young man, you look so pale and exhausted. Your forehead looks a bit dark. Are you okay?" When my mother mentioned the darkened forehead, it refers to the forehead becoming darkened like a bruise. In Chinese culture, this area represents a person's vitality. Once it darkens, it often indicates that the person may be possessed by a ghost or is about to face danger. The driver awkwardly chuckled a couple of times but didn't respond, continuing to drive. But her words disconcerted me, because he has always been intuitive and often said ghosts and other supernatural entities. So when she said that, I started feeling anxious, worried that something might actually happen. Sure enough, after traveling only a few hundred meters, at an intersection, the driver rear-ended the car in front of us while trying to catch a green light. There was a loud bang, and the impact was so strong that I hit my head on the windshield. Immediately, I turned around to check my mom, and she was covering her face with hands, not saying a word. Later, the hospital diagnosed my mother with a fractured nasal bone, requiring hospitalization. The doctor arranged for us to stay in the emergency department on the ground floor. Half an hour after we settled in, a woman in her 30s arrived with a 4-year-old boy. After completing all the formalities, it was already 8 p.m. I asked my brothers to go home and rest and stay at the hospital with my mother. I'm someone who is very particular about beds, so at 12 a.m. I was still unable to sleep and got up to use the restroom. When I returned, I heard my mother crying. I asked what was wrong, but my mother remained silent. Just as I was confused about her, my mother suddenly pointed to the windowsill and shouted loudly, "There's someone there! Go away! Go away!" Then she hysterically demanded to change beds. I broke out in cold sweat at the moment. The The woman in the neighboring bed also immediately woke up, spat toward the windowsill, and then took out some coins from her pocket and threw them on the floor. Your mother must have seen a ghost. Try not to go to the toilet at night. There are a lot of evil spirits here, especially in the emergency room where many people die. Take this mirror and put it under her pillow. After this incident, we couldn't sleep at all. The three of us stayed up all night chatting. Actually, I still believed mother saw it wrong and asked repeatedly what she had seen. However, her answer left a huge shadow to me until now. She said, there was a thin man crouching by the windowsill, about 30 or 40 years old, with a very dark face, like he was poisoned, and he was chugging ceaselessly towards our room. At 3 in the morning, we heard crying outside. I went out with the woman only to find that someone had died. Shortly after, a nurse came in to change the child's bandages. We couldn't help but ask if someone had died just now. The young nurse casually said, yes, this morning a man was transferred out of this room, died of pesticide poisoning. He was so young, only in his 30s. What a pity. After that, the woman and I insisted on not staying in that room anymore and requested to be moved. Fortunately, after changing the rooms, my mom never saw that man again. Later, the narrator shared 2 more stories based on personal experiences. When I was 15, my father passed away from alcohol poisoning very suddenly. Just a few days before the incident, something strange happened. A red spot suddenly appeared on the love line of my palm, and the entire line became red and painful, as if cut by a knife. At the time, I didn't understand what that meant, but then the incident occurred. After my father's passing, we buried him in our hometown. You know, in China, people believe the soul of the deceased returned home on the 7th day to bid farewell to the last time. But on the burial day, a feng shui master calculated the night of his return was around the 11th or 12th day. Since my mother and I weren't very superstitious, we didn't deliberately keep track of the time. But when I returned home, I casually marked that day on the calendar. Then to comfort us, my grandmother also came to accompany us. The 3 of us slept in my room. After my father passed away, I never dreamed of him until one night. In my dream, he was standing ahead of a brickyard, but I couldn't see his face clearly. Then I heard my father saying he was leaving, asking me to hold back tears and look forward and take good care of my mother. It made me cry uncontrollably. The next day, my grandmother said, you cried so fiercely last night. I called you, but you didn't respond. I called your mother, but she didn't wake up either. Is everything okay with you? I told my grandmother about my dream. She said that she hadn't slept at all that night because she kept hearing doors opening and closing upstairs, as well as the sound of sleepers walking around. My grandmother thought it was a thief, so he was very scared, but strangely, our 2 fierce Tibetan mastiffs in the living room didn't bark at all. Could it be that the intruder is someone familiar? Hearing it, I ran downstairs, flipped through the calendar, and coincidentally, the day was the night of my father's supposed return, as calculated by the feng shui master. I found it incredibly unbelievable. In the following years, I rarely dreamed of my father, but the dream from that night is still vivid in my memory to this day. In July 2005, I was involved in a serious car accident on National Highway 318. I suffered 3 broken ribs on both sides of my chest, and my hands and face were cut open in many places, requiring stitches. By the time I arrived at the hospital, I was unconscious. Actually, during the process of rescuing me, I feel like I was riding in an elevator with about 7 or 8 people, both men and women, slowly descending amid the rumbling noise of the elevator. I didn't know which floor we reached when the elevator door opened. I followed those people out of the elevator and found myself in a place resembling a pipe, somewhat like a large pink sausage. We walked through the sausage-like pipe, opening and closing doors one by one. The people who walked with me kept entering the open doors. The people behind the doors were all dressed in white lab coats like doctors. I didn't know how long we walked, but eventually, only 1 other people and I were left. I opened another door. At that moment, something peculiar happened. My father and grandmother, who had passed away several years ago, were sitting on the bed in that room. Seeing my relatives, I felt both sadness and excitement, tears streaming down my face. When my father saw me come in, his expression turned green. He scolded me. "Why are you here? This is not where you should be. Get out!" Suddenly, they pushed me out until I reached the door. Then I regained consciousness in the emergency room, hearing the doctor saying, "Finally you wake up. We were preparing to administer adrenaline to try to save you." My friends who rushed to the hospital said that when they arrived at the hospital gate to pick me up, my entire body was covered in blood, and they all thought I wouldn't make it and had already informed my family to prepare for the worst. But miraculously, I recovered. After 3 months in the hospital, I was discharged. Now when it rains, my chest ribs still occasionally ache, but despite this discomfort, I feel warm and happy about the experience. My departed loved ones, my beloved father and grandmother, were protecting me in their own way. And if they hadn't pushed me out so forcefully, would I still be alive today? I once read a study on near-death experiences which mentioned that many people see something like a tunnel and then encounter their family members feeling a warm sensation. However, if the person can be rescued, their family members will advise them to leave and they will also feel a force pulling them away. So perhaps fate does exist. If it's not your time to die, the other world won't take you. Okay, that's all the stories for today. Hope you enjoy it and bye-bye.